Alright, let's talk about a true legend, the Nvidia GeForce GTX 1660 Super. This graphics card launched way back in 2019, which in tech years feels like a century ago. Yet here we are in 2025, and this GPU is still one of the most talked about options for budget PC builders. Why? Because it hit a sweet spot that few cards ever do. It delivered fantastic 1080p performance for its time, didn't require a monster power supply, and most importantly, it was affordable. It was the people's champion, the go-to card for anyone who just wanted to play games without emptying their entire bank account. The secret sauce for the 1660 Super was its use of GDDR6 memory, a significant upgrade over the regular GTX 1660. This simple change gave it a substantial performance boost, pushing it much closer to its more expensive sibling, the 1660T. It became the undisputed king of value, offering a no-nonsense gaming experience. There were no fancy, headline-grabbing features like ray tracing, just pure, unadulterated rasterization performance. It was a workhorse GPU designed to do one job: play games at 1080p with high frame rates, and it did that job exceptionally well for years. But today is September 21st, 2025, and the gaming landscape looks very different. Games are more demanding, new technologies have become standard, and what was once a powerhouse can quickly become a relic. So the big question we're tackling is whether this old hero can still hang in the modern era. Can you actually buy one of these today and have a good time? Or are you just setting yourself up for disappointment? We've been running a ton of benchmarks on the latest titles to find out if the 1660 Super still has some fight left in it, or if it's finally time to let it retire. So let's get right to it. How does the GTX 1660 Super actually perform in today's games at 1080p? The answer is, it depends. For lighter, competitive esports titles like Valorant, Counter-Strike, 2 League of Legends, this card is still an absolute champ. You can easily crank the settings up to high and enjoy buttery smooth frame rates, often well over 144 FPS. However, the story changes dramatically when you fire up the latest, graphically intensive AAA titles. In games released in 2024 and in 2025, the 1660 Super is starting to show its age. To get a playable 60 FPS, you're going to have to make some serious compromises. We're talking about dropping settings down to a mix of low-medium. Forget about ultra settings. In many new games, that's just not going to happen. The raw horsepower that once seemed so impressive is now just enough to get by, providing a console-like experience rather than a high-end PC one. One of the biggest bottlenecks we're seeing is the 6 GB of VRAM. Back in 2019, 6 GB was plenty for 1080p gaming. But today, game developers are using higher resolution textures and more complex assets, and new games can easily gobble up more than 6 GB of video memory, even at 1080p with high settings. When a game needs more VRAM than the card has, it has to pull data from your system's main RAM, which is much slower. This leads to noticeable stuttering frame drops and textures that pop in and out, which can completely ruin your immersion. Beyond raw performance, the GTX 1660 Super's biggest disadvantage is its lack of modern features. Specifically, it's missing two key technologies that have become standard on Nvidia's RTX cards. Ray tracing. DLSS ray tracing is a sophisticated rendering technique that simulates how light behaves in the real world, creating incredibly realistic reflections, shadows, lighting. The 1660 Super, being a GTX card, has no dedicated hardware, RT cores, to handle this, so you simply can't enable ray tracing in games. However, the other missing feature, DLSS, Deep Learning Super Sampling, is a much bigger deal. DLSS is an AI-powered upscaling technology that renders the game at a lower internal resolution and then uses AI to intelligently reconstruct the image to a higher resolution. The result is a massive performance boost with minimal loss in image quality. It's like getting free frames. Because the 1660 Super lacks the tensor cores required for DLSS, you're stuck with the card's native performance. This is a huge handicap. So, where does that leave us? Let's compare the GTX 1660 Super to its modern rivals. If you're looking at the new market, you'll see cards like the Nvidia RTX 3050, the RTX 4060, and the AMD Radeon RX 6600. Frankly, if you have the budget for any of these new cards, you should buy them instead of a 1660 Super. The AMD RX 6600, for example, offers significantly better raw performance and more VRAM, 8 GB, for a very competitive price. The RTX 3050 and 4060 give you access to DLSS, which is a game changer for longevity and performance in new titles. However, the 1660 Super's main appeal in 2025 is on the used market. You can often find these cards for well under $100, which is an incredibly tempting price point for someone building their very first gaming PC, or upgrading from an ancient integrated graphics solution. For that price, it offers value that is hard to beat. A used RX 6600 might still cost 50 to 70% more, and for a builder on an extremely tight budget, that extra money simply might not be there. The 1660 Super occupies a unique ultra-budget niche where its performance per dollar is still excellent. So who should buy a GTX 1660 Super today? I see two main groups. First, the ultra-budget builder who is scraping together every penny and needs a card that can just play games right now. If your budget is firmly capped at around $100 for a GPU, a used 1660 Super is one of the best choices you can make. Second, the dedicated esports player who almost exclusively plays titles like Valorant, CS2, or Rocket League. In those games, the card's weaknesses don't show, and it delivers all the performance you'll ever need. For everyone else, I would strongly recommend saving up a little more for a modern alternative. If you want to play the latest and greatest AAA games with good settings and stable frame rates, you should be looking at an RX 6600 or an RTX 3060 or 4060. The access to more VRAM and features like DLSS will provide a much better and more future-proof experience. The GTX 1660 Super was a legendary card, a true champion of its time. But in 2025, its reign is over for mainstream gaming. It's a fantastic entry point if you're buying used on a shoestring budget, but it's no longer the king of 1080p.